Single brass ball news now. And in Britain, a rugby player for the Warrington Wolves called Paul Wood had a testicle removed after rupturing it during a game against Leeds Rhinos. That's pretty ballsy. But it gets even ballsier when you hear that he was injured early in the second half, then played on before going to hospital after the match. Andy, I simply do not understand that level of toughness. If that happened to me, and it wouldn't, let me be clear about that, because I'm too cowardly to ever be in a situation when something like that might happen. But if it did, which it wouldn't, I would immediately be screaming out, "Get me off the field immediately! I think I've just ruptured my testicle. I officially withdraw myself from this game, primarily due to the testicle I just ruptured. And let me be clear, I'm not just withdrawing myself from this particular game, I'm never playing this stupid sport ever again. On account of the fact, not to labour a point, I just ruptured a f***ing testicle playing it. Also, I would politely ask that this game is abandoned now. I do not think it's appropriate that either team continue playing because, if I have to remind you, someone ruptured a testicle out here, and that person was me. Hands up everyone who doesn't have a ruptured testicle. Oh, that's good. I notice a lot of hands up in the air out there. You'll notice that someone doesn't have their hand in the air, and instead has their hand over their ruptured testicle. That man is standing before you right now. Well, not exactly standing. That man is buckled over before you right now, awaiting an ambulance. I have ruptured my testicle, and I think the appropriate amount of attention I deserve at this time is all the attention. This is complete bullshit! That's more or less what I'd say, Andy.
Yeah. And it's happened on the same weekend. There was a lot of debate about diving in football and players feigning injury at the merest contact. And Paul Wood in the Rugby League Grand Final, that's basically like the Super Bowl for our American listeners, but a bit less glitzy. I think the halftime show is usually a man in a flat cap taking his whippet for a walk around the pitch before sitting down to eat a pie with no nutritional value. I'd very much like to see the Black Eyed Peas take that on. So, as you say, Wood not only ruptured his testicle, but carried on playing for 20 minutes before going to hospital to have it amputated. And he then told the BBC afterwards, "It sounds worse than it is."
What? What? Does it, Andy? Or
Yeah.
does it sound exactly as bad as it is? Because as far as I can tell from reading accounts of the incident, he ruptured a f***ing testicle. And the mere words of that sentence alone are making my eyes water. I'm gripping my balls right now, talking about this story, as if to reassure my dual plums that I will never be glib about their welfare.
He admitted it does smart a bit when you get hit down there. So, it's a hard man's game, rugby league, John. It's a hard man's game.
He continued to show a superhuman mastery of understatement as he went on to say there was nothing special about this. As a rugby player, you just do your job until you hear the final whistle. There's nothing special about it. Not special, Andy. He lost a testicle. To him, what is out of the ordinary? He must be a nightmare to be around on so-called special occasions. How was your birthday party, Paul, darling? Did you have a special day? Well, not really, love. I've still got both my kidneys. It'd be more eventful, to put it mildly. Routine? Yes. Pleasant? Sure. Special? Absolutely not, sweetheart.
There have been other incidents of bollock-related injuries in sports. And in the other code of rugby, rugby union, notorious New Zealand hardman Buck Shelford, playing a match against France in the 80s, had his scrotum ripped open, told the doctor to stitch it up, returned to the pitch, and was then knocked out. So, well, that shows the folly of it, John. I mean, I usually take an hour off from anything after sneezing just to get my equilibrium back.
Although, to be fair to Paul Wood, he's not been completely dismissive of it. He did admit that he's going to look into wearing added protection next season, saying it's something that I'm going to look at because obviously I've only got one now, so I've got to look after it. The very fact, Andy, that in the course of one game, the way he referred to his testicles went from plural to singular suggests that game was a lot more special than he gave it credit for.
I do think it is a shame, John, that rugby league is not covered by the American media and the way they write headlines, because I think it would have looked rather splendid to have rugby league player loses final, bollock. cycling big brass balls now, and, well, I mean, if Paul Wood thought he had it tough, his fellow sportsman, the unicyclist Lince Armstrong, won the Tour de France, despite being used as a pincushion, it has been alleged. Are we covered legally from that? Lance Armstrong, the prominent cyclist, he has shown amazing balls, John, because the US Anti-Doping Agency have released 1,000 pages of evidence against him, gathered from more than 25 different sources, and he has continued to say bullshit to it. And you have to admire that, John. I mean, the complexity of the operation described is frankly extraordinary. But his continuing defence of himself is either one of the greatest cases of barefaced balls in history, or one of the greatest acts of delusion in history, or he is the victim of one of the most extraordinarily orchestrated lying campaigns in the history of the human race.
The United States Anti-Doping Agency has now labelled him a serial cheat who led, I quote, the most sophisticated, professionalised and successful doping programme that sport has ever seen. Basically, Andy, if successful doping and subsequent evasion of testers was a sport, and it was a cycle race, Lance Armstrong would have won it an unprecedented 7 times. Armstrong has now been banned from cycling and stripped of his titles. And as you say, his brass balls don't come from the fact that he took so many drugs his balls may have shrunk and become so leathery and tight that they've formed into little brass ball bearings. No, his brass balls come from the fact that he is still claiming that he is innocent. He is sticking to his story despite a positive mountain of evidence against him. His lawyer has even described the report as a one-sided hatchet job, which is true, only in the sense that a butcher performs a one-sided hatchet job on a cow that has been dead and refrigerated for days.
Amongst the various allegations are that he paid $1 million into the Swiss bank account of an Italian doctor who helped him. Now, I cannot stress how important it is, Buglers, to get those two nationalities, Swiss bank account and Italian doctor, the right way round. Because if you get them the wrong way round, you are going to end up absolutely skinned and absolutely dead. Amongst the other allegations against Armstrong are that he rode the 2002 Tour de France on a Kawasaki 350. He responded to queries from the media about the noise his bike was making in a mountain stage by claiming he was growling to ward off any bears that might be lurking in the forest. There were also allegations that he had an extra pair of legs surgically removed from another young rider in his team and grafted onto his own hips to give him 4 legs compared with most other riders' 2 or 3 in the also cheating Festina team. Also, that his blood tested positive for being a condor after a gene transfusion program in which he and his teammates were given blood and DNA from various birds of prey to improve their eyesight, stamina, gliding speed and the beaky aerodynamics of their faces. Armstrong concealed the feathers that grew as a side effect under his famous trademark yellow jersey, but the whole shebang was nearly blown open on stage 14 of the 2004 race when Armstrong's US postal colleague, George Hincapie, pulled over to the side of the road near Carcassonne and laid an egg. Also allegations, John, that there were 10 different Lance Armstrong clones, and each day, whichever one was riding, would be so much fresher than all the other riders, most of whom had only 2 or 3 clones as their team's cloning programs weren't quite so advanced. Armstrong has also claimed that his feet were off the ground when the allegations were made, so he is technically innocent of all charges.